Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. Happy Pond webinar day. We do these sessions every week here at noon, and we have an amazing group assembled today to talk all things LinkedIn and nonprofits. There is so much for us to dig into, and we're really excited to have this incredible panel of experts here to answer all of your burning questions. Just a quick reminder for everybody, my name is Mitch Stein. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Pond. We are a marketplace between nonprofit leaders and everything that they need to power their organization. Definitely check us out. And if you're here on this session and you answer our survey at the end, you'll get $50 into your account. So start building up those credits now. And whenever you need something, you'll be able to use them on Pond. And without further ado, I want to start getting through intros so we can get into the meat of the discussion today. So we'll go around the room. And I'll start off with you, Mary, if you don't mind sharing obviously who you are, what you're up to these days, and a few layers of your identity that are most important to you.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here. Again, my name is Mary Alex. A lot of people call me MA. I just recently left working for Microsoft, which is actually the owner of LinkedIn since 2016. I worked in the philanthropy side of the business as well as the enterprise side of the business, and helped run a philanthropies program for LinkedIn and Microsoft under the Tech Sparks area of the business. And now up to date is I have my own consulting firm called I'm All LinkedIn. And I help a lot of nonprofits, individuals, small and medium-sized businesses to use LinkedIn more profoundly through more data and AI tactics. So thanks for having me, and I'm on quite an esteemed panel.
Oh, thank you so much, Mary. Glad to have you.
What impassions me is I love gravel and mountain biking, and I'm actually in the Bay Area right now to do some open water swimming. So I'm excited.
Wow, going to Alcatraz?
Not Alcatraz. We're going to jump off of Pier 41 down in the marina in that area of the district and swim back to the foot of Van Ness Avenue. So
amazing. Well, good luck.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Awesome. All right, Joey, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hey, everyone. Joey Zamaya. I currently lead enterprise sales and strategy for a part of LinkedIn called LinkedIn for Nonprofits, which is the part of our company that works with all of our nonprofits in helping them find ways to hire and to fundraise and to market. I really love the nonprofit space because a nonprofit organization, which I'm now on the national board of, was a big part of helping me and my family get back on our feet when we experienced homelessness as a teenager. That organization is the Salvation Army. And for me, having one foot in business and one foot in philanthropy is a dream come true, because I often argue that you don't have to compromise between doing well and doing good. So I'm really grateful for having my dream job and being able to work with so many people who help people. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Joey. Alex?
Hey, I'm Alex. I'm the founder and CEO of Revenue Zen. I have been getting progressively more startup-y over time until 5 years ago I founded my own. I was, identity-wise, I was not the sold candy in school type of person. I feel like a lot of people in my position they were always doing this, but I stumbled in and have, Joey, like you, always tried to find ways to do well and do good at the same time, wherever possible. And my journey with LinkedIn has been that it's paid a third of our bills for the last 4.5 years or so. So I'll tell you what works for me and what works for our clients. So that's my story.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex. And last but not least, Tanya.
Yeah, awesome. Hey everyone, I'm Tanya Bhattacharya. I like to say a recovering nonprofit executive director. I work for a nonprofit addiction treatment center for women and their families for 12 years. And you can imagine what that was like. It was wonderful and incredible and a lot. And so now I have segued into launching a thought leadership consultancy for vision-led female founders, really helping them stand out as they stand up for their mission. And oftentimes that's female nonprofit founders. Sometimes it's social impact entrepreneurs, but the common thread is that they're all doing good in the world. And I think LinkedIn is the best platform to show up as a thought leader and attract a community that's ready to help you make shift happen. So I love LinkedIn, love this conversation. Let's get it going. Thanks for having me here.
Yes, I'm so excited. And by the way, to the audience, a few people have already jumped into the comments. This is your chance to pick the brains of really the top experts in the space around this platform. So please don't be shy. Get in there and let us know where you're coming from and what you're hoping to learn today, and we'll make sure to cover it. To get started, I think I always I'm a history buff. I like to start with a little bit of a history lesson. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate that LinkedIn's been around for 20 years. Joey, I would love for you to start us off to tell us what's been some of the biggest evolution of the platform? What do people not appreciate about the history of LinkedIn? And just give us a bit of a lesson on that front.
Sure. Yeah. May 5th is LinkedIn's birthday. We're already making plans to celebrate that internally, especially since we're finally able to come back together for the first time. I would describe LinkedIn's journey and evolution as evolving from being a system of record to being a system of engagement. So before LinkedIn was a huge Rolodex, right, where you'd create a profile, you'd have people look you up. That's where you represented yourself digitally in a professional context. And now if you look at the engagement on the platform, at least in terms of how we measure success, virtually breaking every record that we've ever had in the history of the company. In fact, about 3 people create a LinkedIn profile every second, 3 new people, about 130 people every minute. And I think the main reason for that is because we've always had an emphasis on 2 things. Number one, the value that you get as a member for being on the platform, and also the trust that you have in us as a platform that you have yourself on. That's not very common nowadays. So I think that our growth and the value that people are getting from us, really based on that trust, is showing up in the numbers, which I, biasly speaking, am very happy about.
Yeah, and Mary, I'd love to hear a bit from your perspective from the inside and the outside at the company. How has the brand changed? I know Joey talked about how some of the function has changed, but how have you seen the brand change over the years?
Yeah, so I think when Microsoft purchased it in 2016, it was pretty revolutionary for Microsoft too. Up until our recent proposed purchase around gaming, LinkedIn had been the biggest purchase. I think it was 24.6 billion, something around that dollar amount. And since that time, what I hear from multiple users is how much more profound the platform is around data and AI. I mean, when you think about how much LinkedIn's look and feel, the depth of what you can do with LinkedIn, even on the free version, it has dramatically changed since Microsoft's purchase. And they've dumped a lot of revenue into improving the platform overall. And it's much more now trend setting even than it once was as a really early adopter. So I think that even though the businesses have been kept somewhat, separate, nonetheless, in my professional opinion, I think it's dramatically improved since Microsoft's purchase.
Awesome.
I don't know if Joey would agree, but
I would.
Yeah, and Tanya is someone who spent so much time in a leadership position in the nonprofit space and now advising folks around building brand and using LinkedIn. How did you see it evolve as a use case for a nonprofit, or how did you think about it 10 years ago as a nonprofit leader versus now?
Yeah, well, what was interesting is I joined the nonprofit right out of college, and so what I thought about LinkedIn was it was a place to find a job, right? That was the only use case for it. And what I realized while we're using it for thought leadership and growing a community, reaching out to corporate sponsors, cultivating sponsors, stewarding them, the list goes on of use cases of how you can use LinkedIn to cultivate an audience for a nonprofit. But what I found is there's been a real humanization of LinkedIn, which I think is what Joey was speaking to. And really, it's used as being able to serve as a resource versus just putting your resume on there. So I think that's a big misconception that it's just to find a job. No, you can build a really beautiful community on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and Alex, I know you must see this all the time when you're working with clients, given you work on LinkedIn as well as other marketing efforts. What are people's biggest misconceptions that you have to dispel when talking to them about using LinkedIn?
I think it's the one that we just mentioned. The first slide on my usual workshop for a team of hundreds is LinkedIn is not just your resume, it's your own personal marketing asset. And so if anyone who's engaging with clients or the public, I first tell them that, like, we need to dispel this as just looking for a job. And I would say, yeah, if you're looking for a job, then treat it as that, right? Treat it as marketing for that. But while you are in that, while you are doing development or sales or anything like that, then treat it like that. And so people don't really want to hear about you and your accomplishments. They want to hear about how you can help them do whatever they're here to do. And so in the sales world, people would put, I crushed quota, I went to President's Club. Well, your prospects don't care about that, right? They care about how you can work with them. So that analogy applies to a lot of different places, whether you're in consulting or nonprofit or sales. Flip that lens from I'm going to put my resume stake in the ground to how am I engaging with the people that are viewing my profile, who are interacting with me.
Yeah, and just to add to what Alex said, I heard someone say this really well a few days ago when I was talking about a non-profit leader, talking with a nonprofit leader. He said, LinkedIn has become non-optional. If you think about the shift in generational representation of donors and partners, and then needing to reach incoming audiences and make things sustainable, it's not optional anymore. And I would say that the data supports that. So it's a good way to frame it in terms of where people are at, because I think it's just not only a matter of finding people, but to Tanya's point, also reaching them, right? Because it has to be both. So I like the way that was phrased.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, if I can add to that. Oh, sorry, Mitch. Yeah,
No,
I wanted to add to what Joey said. I really, really like that. I think it is non-optional. A lot of people come to me and say, well, but nobody's really using LinkedIn. But the reality is that they're not always necessarily posting their own content. And so that's kind of a misconception. I think there's a lot of maybe lurkers, if you will, but when you send them a message, they respond right away. And I found that a lot as a nonprofit ED, I was able to send messages to board members, to really busy people who, were, potential corporate sponsors, people who were running huge teams. And I'd send them an email sometimes and they wouldn't respond, but I'd send them a LinkedIn message and they would respond right away, because oftentimes it's an app on their phone and it just kind of helps you stand out and get through to people that you really want to talk to.
Real life scenario of this, I had a development director of an organization I'm involved in reach out to me on LinkedIn because she noticed a connection and she was hoping to get an introduction. And I immediately texted the executive director and I was like, gold star for your development director. They are using LinkedIn and it's super effective. And I'm really responsive there, way more than email. So totally true.
The other thing I just want to throw in there is that with clients of mine who are nonprofits, some of the reminders that I give them is that not only are there funders who are profoundly using nonprofit at this point, big foundations, et cetera, but also from an NGO perspective, with, depending on what you read, nearly 10 million NGOs around the world, there's also unique partnerships that you can garner, reaching out to NGOs. And, it's endless. It's just germinates, like Joey was saying.
So we've spent a lot of time talking about like why it's obvious, but I would love, Joey, if you don't mind, zooming out. Imagine you've gotten to an island where people have no idea what LinkedIn is, and you're trying to pitch them on like the so what, why you need to join. And I'll add, that when we talk about the messaging for Pond, I strive to make it as obvious why you should join Pond as it is LinkedIn. So I'm excited to hear what your pitch is to people.
Depends on which island, but my general answer, it is, especially in a post-COVID increasingly virtual environment, one of the main requirements to be successful in any industry and job is social capital. If you think about putting yourself in any role imaginable, whether it's being a sales professional, a fundraiser, a leader, your network and the social capital that you have in being able to do your job is mission critical as people continue to be physically separated by region. And I mean, one stat on LinkedIn that validates this is this time last year, with some exception, maybe like plus or minus a couple months, more than 60% of people on LinkedIn had changed their job year over year. And think about the people that you know that are moving to different cities and changing industries and changing profession. So not only maintaining your current network and finding out where people are at and why you would care, but also building your network. Going back to that, it being non-optional is the main reason why I would say, even if you didn't want to join LinkedIn, which you should, you almost kind of have to because of the environment that we're in today. And this is in addition to the really great use cases for job seekers, for fundraisers, for leaders who want to be viewed as thought leaders within their industry or their profession. So it's just the reality that we live in today, where this is where people are at. And this is where you will find them. So I think that's the red thread that transcends any one profession or industry.
I would just like to reiterate that stat you just threw out of 60% of LinkedIn users change their job over the course of a year. For any of the nonprofits on this session who manage a CRM of donor information, that 60% of your donors could have gotten a new email address in the past year. And if you're connected with them on LinkedIn, it doesn't matter. You didn't lose touch with them. That is so powerful. Alex, I'd love on this like 101, I hear this personally from a lot of people. The getting started on LinkedIn is very intimidating, where they just don't even know where to begin. And I'd love to hear how you counsel people in getting started and what the best first steps are.
Yeah, that's a good question. The way I got started was almost by accident. I was at a job and just sort of had a very, I would say, like moderate opinion of what I had accomplished. And then my boss made a comment like, a few other people in boardrooms around Portland are talking about what you've done with the team over here. And I had this moment of like, do I know one or two things that are important to share? That's crazy. And I just started to write because I wanted to test and see like if what I had learned was either useful to others, totally wrong, or somewhere in between. So I wrote little episodes, snapshots, stories of what was going on, and just treated it as like the work version of what was going on in my life. But I didn't treat it as just facts, but more stories. And that was the start of me getting started. And so these days when I recommend people who want to get started but don't have that need to cross that barrier, I encourage them to do small steps. If you don't want to write a full post and put yourself out there, write 2 or 3 comments a day on people's posts who you think are great. And then make those a little bit longer, more thoughtful, until you write something of your own. When I was in college, a professor told me, this is not your time to write your grand theory of everything. Just take one thing and do justice to that one little thing. And so I think when people think about writing a LinkedIn, they think this has to be my big expose. This is my... No, it's just take one tiny thing that's like a little thing that happened to you at work where you learned something. Or, you know, if you closed a big new major donor, how did one conversation go that opened your eyes? Like, it's more poetry than prose. This doesn't need to be a big grand thing. Just these little snapshots, and then take the time to reflect and be mindful and consider those little snapshots of what you do. And when you learn something, maybe write a post about that. And you don't need to make big proclamations. It's just, here was my experience doing something. Because at the end of the day, your experience is not up for debate. It's yours. So no one can come and tell you, oh, that was wrong. Well, no, it was my experience. This is what happened and how I felt about it. So it's neither right nor wrong. It's just this thing that happened. And that can be kind of hard to do if you're used to being in a very buttoned up professional setting where you have to like be right all the time. And that just seems like way too much pressure. So I would advise not trying to do that anywhere in life, especially on LinkedIn, and especially when you're getting started.
Yeah, you can't be too precious with it. Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
Alex is spot on. One main thing is you're in a professional context, right? So be professional. Hopefully that one is pretty obvious. But adding on to what Alex said, there's two considerations you should have when you think about posting. Number one, humanizing yourself and coming from a place of authenticity, right? Like Alex said, this is my journey. And the people I'm connected to hopefully care about me and what's going on with me. So just speaking from a place of authenticity. But the other practical consideration is what you're posting relevant and valuable for your connections and your audience? Especially as we've introduced this creator mode, where it's not just about your connections, it's about your followers as well. So is the brand associated with your posts positive in that people are getting something from it, in addition to staying apprised on you as a professional?
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's a way for people to kind of deepen their care about what you're doing in your journey, versus just having to catch up. I mean, I encourage people to catch up offline and one-on-one and all these things. And in addition to that, let people catch up with what you're doing in your life and your professional life and what you're learning. And if you connect with people that are reasonably relevant to you, so I wouldn't suggest connecting with anyone under the sun. Connect with people who are reasonably relevant to you. And then you have a theme, right? The people you've connected with form this theme of, all right, they're generally in development, or they're, leadership, or they coach leadership, whatever it is for you. And then the stories you tell can kind of tie back to that theme, whatever it is. And maybe 10% of things is, you taking a picture with your dog, talking about how you self-care, right? Or something that doesn't need to be on the theme. But then like 90% is pretty on theme. That's the equation I need to tell people is most of your stuff, stay on theme. Don't be too hard on yourself about it. And then once in a while, sure, like this is just who I am as a person. I think you can keep it very professional without, like I said, it's what you do for your self-care on Saturdays, I think perfectly does fit. It doesn't need to be, this is Facebook, this is Instagram. No, it's just me. And like, this is part of how I take care of myself and things like that. When I get the hot tub installed, I'm absolutely posting about it on LinkedIn.
I love that. Sorry, go ahead, Mary.
Oh, I think the other thing about LinkedIn that I relish is that people are showing up as their best selves, right? Because this is a professional platform, it's people are going to be very mindful about what they post compared to, I won't name them all, but we know the other social media platforms where people don't show up at their best. And I think as far as bringing this back to sort of more about the nonprofit sector, I think it's really important to figure out, as a nonprofit, how are you going to project your mission? What kind of messaging do you want to be pushing out that ignites donors and volunteers, all of the other constituents that are using LinkedIn? And so I think it's, I know when I've run nonprofits, we've sat down and really thought about what are those key branding messages that we want to get out as a team that all of us are pushing out.
Yeah, and it brings up a really good point, Mary, that I'd love to dig in on. And Deborah brought up this question of, that she recently got access to her company page and it took a year. I think that's a really good thing for us to dig in on, which is, where does the personal brand use case of LinkedIn stop and where does the company use case start? And I'd love, Tanya, for you to kick off that conversation of how you think about the two and what's the best way to approach the differences.
Sure, that's a really good question. And I tend to really live on the personal brand side. But that being said, when I, during my nonprofit days, I would use the company page for all types of things, relevant events, alumni testimonials from women that have gone through our program, really always tying it back to the mission. But that being said, I think personal pages are fabulous, not just for us as the development professional or the nonprofit executive director, but actually like kind of tying back to what Mary was saying about, enhancing the mission, actually spending time in a board meeting, like making it part of the agenda where you're actually engaging with other board members to build their brand, encouraging them to build their brand on LinkedIn and making your organization a part of that brand, because they're obviously passionate about it. They're volunteers, they're involved. So how can you encourage, support, and help your board members, your volunteers, your committee members, maybe your other staff, talk about what they're doing on a daily basis, right? Or a weekly basis. What are they proud about? Why did they join the mission of the organization? And what's so great about that is it just like exponentifies your reach, because your board members obviously are connected to people that maybe the organization is not yet. And it just continues to get your name, your organization, your mission in front of individuals that can absolutely help you fulfill your mission. So I know I didn't fully answer that question, but I just wanted to pop in that piece because I think that, it's not just about our LinkedIns, it's about our supporters' LinkedIns too.
And if I may, spot on. This is the last time that we did an exercise. This is the third time we did it with the director of development and the advisory board, specifically creating a summary of all of the connections that were of interest to the development team, to the board members, because they had no idea. Oh, I'm connected to that person? Great, I'll reach out to him. Almost serving that to them on a platter and giving that connection a call to action to talk to that development director. And the results were huge every single time. So it's a perfect example of where you're assessing that second and third degree connection of the person that you're connected to already, and it paying dividends almost right away.
Yeah, and Alex, when you have, I know Tony just brought this up in the chat too, that it is a struggle for, especially if you're of a small business or a startup and you're in a leadership position, like what is yours versus what is the company? Like, how do you counsel your clients on that question? Oh, Alex, you're on mute.
Nice. Good question. Have you ever seen those faces that are like the blended average face? That's kind of the company page. It's like kind of the blended average of what people are saying. And so I like the company page for the things that are common to more on the organization of like, here's what we believe as a team and a company. I do tend to lean more toward personal pages. More times than not, I tell people it's mostly about you and your personal page, because people do business with people and they work with people, not with organizations. So I like it to be person forward. I'd rather they recognize your name and face than your company name. If I had a choice, I'd rather them all. And so when I encourage people to craft their headline, it's about go beyond your job title. It's like you, the org, and what you're doing there or something. It's the place you're at right now, wherever you work, that's a chapter in your story. But the thing that's consistent is that it's your story. So if someone says, I want to use our company page only, I don't want to use personal pages, I usually tell them that's not a good fit to work with us, because something is misaligned in how we view LinkedIn and how you do. If someone only wants to use a company page, I would consider it kind of hiding a little bit behind that. And I would encourage people to not hide, to show, like Joey was saying, that authenticity that lets people connect with you, the person, and let the sum of the care for the people and their journeys and what they're doing sort of flow through like roots of a tree to the organization as a whole, which is made up of all of these people and their journeys. Just posting on the company page is like saying, look at this leaf, but the roots of the tree are where it's about. And I think that does change when you're a larger organization and you have many more followers on the brand, and the brand has much more of a history than many of the people do there. But that transition takes a long time to make. And the average person who is asking this question is at the point where they should be using their personal pages for their voice. If you are, Google or Microsoft, feel free to disregard that advice, but that's not who I'm speaking to. So smaller nonprofit, even larger nonprofit, I think the ED or CEO or the founder or leader, that person's voice is more valuable than the company's page. I do not follow Gravity Payments on LinkedIn. I do follow Dan Price.
And there was a golden nugget in what you just said there, Alex. That's really practical and important about utilizing your headline effectively and not just being your job title. Number one, a profile picture, if you don't have one, you should not expect much success. And the more welcoming and approachable your profile photo is, the better. But the reality of it is, both if you're being looked at by a recruiter or if you're being sized up by someone, usually all they see, because the majority of LinkedIn engagement is on the mobile app by far. The majority of people use LinkedIn on their phone. When they see you in a search result, the two things they see before they double click on your profile are your photo and your headline. So if you're not optimizing those in this attention economy where it's really hard to not only get but to keep someone's attention for more than 10 seconds, then you're not going to get as much engagement as you want. So Alex is absolutely right in really making sure that primetime real estate, which is your profile photo and your headline, invite people and make them curious to want to learn more about you and to connect with you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think one more tactic to add on, an addendum to what Joey just said. As you know, one thing that's been added recently is that you're able, to give your name, a little, I think it's like 30 seconds. Am I right, Joey? Where you have 30 seconds where you can record your name. And within nonprofits that I've been working with, people talk about, they say their name and then they give the mission of the nonprofit, like in a really crisp way. So I think to utilize every feature on your LinkedIn profile is key when you're trying to, again, push out a mission, build brand, etc. And it's just little features like that can really, make a difference.
Totally. You can do two things on your mobile app. Record a 30-second video about who you are and what you're about. And also you can record the correct audio pronunciation of your name, right? Inviting people to get it right for once. If you're like me, Zumaya, you've been called everything except for Zumaya. So those are two really useful and also inclusive features that make it easier for people to connect with you and learn more about you.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to get into more of these like tactics, advice, and I know David in the chat had a few questions we're definitely going to get to. Before we do that, though, and leave kind of like the strategy element, Tanya, I would love to hear from you, since I know you work exclusively with very busy people in leadership, starting their own companies or organizations. When you hear that, like, I'm too busy, how do you both like help them make time for because we all know for anything good to happen, there's investment of time, but also like, what are the most, it's like, okay, I know you're busy, but these are the two things you really need to start doing on LinkedIn consistently.
Yeah, two things. I love that. Yeah, because schedule is definitely one of the biggest barriers, because it tends to always, people want to be on LinkedIn and it just falls to the end of the to-do list. So one of the two tips that I want to give is find an accountability buddy. And I know that might sound basic, but the reason that it's so great for LinkedIn especially is if you're a nonprofit executive director, find another nonprofit executive director who's in a similar field, maybe also in a, maybe you're an addiction treatment nonprofit ED, find a mental health nonprofit ED. And that way you two are going to have similar relationships and contacts. And so support each other. Maybe every Wednesday morning at 8 a.m., that can be your 30-minute LinkedIn time. Make it fun. Hop on Zoom, do co-working. Make sure it's a person you want to be in a relationship with, so you look forward to this time. It's kind of like going to the gym. Like if I am going to want to go to the gym early, I want to make sure that my friend's going to be there. That's going to get me there. So it's kind of the same thing with LinkedIn. Find that accountability buddy and just spend 30 minutes together engaging with your board members, leaving thoughtful comments on other people's stuff. And that would be my second tip. If you don't have a lot of time to create your own content, I would say commenting, and I think Alex said this earlier, commenting is leaving thoughtful comments on established thought leaders in your field who kind of already have an audience that you want to get in front of is really, really great. Because I tend to think of LinkedIn as kind of a 24/7, 365 conference or exhibit hall. Like, back in the day when we'd go to conferences, it's kind of like that. And so leaving a thoughtful comment is kind of like leaving a very, very thoughtful, comment, kudos, question at the end of like a breakout session. Everybody sees it. They see you leaving that comment. They think well of you. The poster feels great because they've got this great engagement on their post. So I have found, leaving comments sometimes is even more impactful than creating my own content. And, you know, I think Alex said this, I'm just kind of reiterating what he's saying, but that would be like the number one strategy to start if you're just super busy. Just leave comments. And that way you get to do what you already do so well as a nonprofit professional, is build relationships, right?
You said it. Sorry, I just wanted to plus one that. We refer to it as post reciprocation. Like literally, if you're showing the love to your connections, they're going to do the same. It's absolutely true.
Yeah, and something and that's spot on too, Joey, but something Tanya's brought up several times, which is what I love about LinkedIn is it's all additive. There's no competition. Like you bringing a friend on, or like encouraging your board or your donors or your staff, you're all helping each other reach a wider audience, build more relationships. It's all so additive. And that's what's really special about the dynamic. And I think that's a similar theme across a lot of the advice here. And that would be my advice on the like, oh, I don't have time, is just like, no, this is actually really powerful on so many different levels once you start digging into it. So I appreciate all the advice there. I wanted to touch on a few of the like more tactical questions people brought up. So David Schwab here mentioned in the comments, he's curious about organic reach on LinkedIn, like how that, if you are navigating multiple platforms, like how does it differ in your own strategy as you're thinking about time spent or content placed on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or TikTok, et cetera, et cetera. And Joey, I'm sure this comes up all the time in your meetings with customers and clients. So I'd love for you to kick us off.
So was the question, what are best practices for using, like what mediums to drive organic growth, or what are the stats behind, or both?
Yeah, just this question on the screen here. Can you speak to the organic reach on LinkedIn compared to other social networks?
Yes, but I won't. I actually want to point towards people towards our hub that we invest in heavily at nonprofit.linkedin.com. So not only are you going to find a lot of useful information about engagement in the platform, but you'll also find a lot of resources and guides that we create to make it really easy for nonprofits to set up their page, set up their profile, and understand all of the ways that they can use LinkedIn. Here's a couple of tactical things that I will point out, though, in order to optimize organic reach. Number one, video is queen. The more that you can leverage short form video, especially showing your own face or the face of others, you're going to get a bigger ROI on your post than any other media format. The second thing is, don't just repost an article's URL. You should put some type of rich media format, like a picture of the event or something that is native to the post, within the post, and then click the link to that article, because that's also going to drive more engagement. Because the bottom line in terms of how the algorithm is currently designed, if you get and keep people's attention in the feed, that's going to increase the reach of that post. And then the second thing that accomplishes, which continues to increase the reach of the post, is the more engagements that an individual's post will get from their second and third degree connections outside of the network. That's also going to create more visibility of that post in the feed. So I don't have exact stats offhand about what organic reach will do in comparison to like Twitter or Facebook, but I do know that the most successful posts that I've seen, the ones that I've posted, and then the stats behind the scenes, those are things that you should be really thoughtful about in terms of maximizing the reach of your post.
Yeah, I mean, I'll jump in here with random tidbits just as a super user of like things I see on my end. But I think one of the benefits is also the relative permanence of your posts from an organic reach perspective. So people will continue to comment and engage with your posts 1 to 2 weeks later. I mean, on every other social platform, they are fully 24-hour cycle feeds. And so that's really powerful to have that kind of sticking power, which is probably harder to quantify with a traditional organic reach stat. But David, that's definitely something that I see.
Mary, you're on mute.
The other thing I'll throw in real quick, and you can even access this on the free version, is what's called your social selling index score, your SSIC. And again, you can just Google it or Bing it I should say Bing it, and look that up. But that is an all-encompassing score that shows you, in essence, how your usage is, how much of your profile is complete, how high a visibility you're getting in your posting. And it's an amazing data and AI-driven score, again, that everybody can get from their profile. And I really encourage all my clients really to track that score. And it's also tracking your score from a deeper conversation. It's also tracking your score across all of the connections that you have. So again, this is more data and AI driven that LinkedIn has become. But I'd really encourage you to look up your own score.
There's one thing I wanted to add as well in terms of the question around organic reach, because what I will say is that when I'm on LinkedIn, I get the most organic reach out of any other platform that I'm on, when I'm using the personal side of it. But the other thing too is it's the right reach, like it's the right reach. And what I mean by that is taking a nonprofit use test case. We used to always have this annual event and we had a major corporate sponsor. And so we would, write a post about that, tag the individuals that we knew there, tag the organization. And when you tag those individuals, their bosses get notified on LinkedIn, their vendors get notified, like their competitors, who are in the same space as them get notified. So it's like, I know I said this earlier, but it's organic reach, but it's reaching the right people who also have the ability and the affinity to your mission and can get to know you and start to support you through that.
And yeah, that's a great point. I think one thing important to know about how this would be relevant in the future is one of our main priorities on the platform is to increase our creator community. That's why we've done things like implement creator mode for people on their profile. We even have a quickly growing team of people who just support creators. That's all they do. Every day, all day is to get them up and running on the platform. But also we're changing the metrics and the reporting of your own individual posts to give you more intel on what audiences you're reaching, even down to the granular level of what is the company most people viewed your post or from, top 5, what geographies, what industries. I mean, you can get very specific now in terms of the metrics and the demographics that you're able to see from your posts. And this is one of our main priorities. So it's only going to continue to grow from here.
Yeah, something that I'm hearing from a lot of these points is that virality is not the goal. Like, I think on most social media platforms, the goal is to like go viral. And actually in LinkedIn, it's really to go deep. And I think that that makes it less intimidating. You're not trying to be a celebrity. You're just trying to connect with the right audience. And that, to me, is a much more attainable goal and objective, and also like just more satisfying than trying to be famous. It's really not what it's about. So I really appreciate that. One comment I just want to make sure we answered from Dawn that came up in the chat. She was asking about the video. If Joey, there's an ideal length when you said short form video. What does short mean in the context of LinkedIn?
Yeah. So under 2.5 minutes is ideal. Even better if and we're talking about posts, right? Not a LinkedIn Live engagement or an event per se. Even better if you're gifted at being concise and effective in the way that you present and that you speak. But either way, the most critical part of any video that you do is that first 30 seconds, because that's either going to keep or lose someone's attention. So you really want to that's why you see a lot of creative people, they post something. I did a post this morning talking about our internal diversity program. The first thing I wrote is diversity is being invited to the party, but inclusion is being asked to dance. That was like fodder for the rest of the post that you had to click. And 3,000 views later, that's an example of where you got to keep someone's attention. So anything where you're sharing, depending on how important it is, you want to keep it under 2.5 minutes. The shorter, the better. But it's really that first 30 seconds that's critical to keeping someone's attention. So that would be my guidance on video creation.
Awesome. Thanks, Joey. And Don, yes, this is recorded. This will be available on the Pond LinkedIn, on our YouTube channel. We put a blog together, so it'll eventually make its way to our podcast. So very accessible after the fact. One other thing that came up in the chat earlier was about the non-organic use case of LinkedIn, and especially for nonprofits. And I don't know, I'm sure everyone has some experience with this, whoever wants to jump in, but I pulled one question, but have you seen nonprofits successfully use advertising features within LinkedIn, be it for events or for fundraising or board members? Like it's hard to justify that ROI at so many organizations. When is it appropriate, and what's the best way to go about it?
I could take a first stab at that. So there's over 700,000 nonprofits on LinkedIn with a page currently, and that number is growing very quickly. The answer to this question is always relative to the amount of reach and followers that a nonprofit has on the platform. So if you're not investing in your content strategy to acquire more followers and to have more visibility, then you're not going to get a big ROI necessarily, because your company page is the hub of everything that you do as an organization on LinkedIn. Now, from your campaign manager, which is, unless you're spending a considerable amount on LinkedIn in terms of advertising, and in that case, you'll have a rep. Campaign manager on your page is where you launch your advertisements and where you manage your marketing activity. I've seen people who have doubled down here and invest heavily have a huge ROI. Salvation Army's national page went from 40,000 followers to 85,000 followers in a little bit over a year, because they were intentionally advertising on that platform and they got ROIs for their events. If they weren't, they wouldn't. But one thing I would urge you to do is to really understand the capability and the budgeting that is built into your campaign manager, and then just do some pilots. If you have a marquee event, a fundraising event, or you have some other thing that you want to draw attention to, do some pilot, like A/B testing with your audience, and then continue to grow that based on how that's informed your strategy over time. Because depending on what regions you want to meet, like all of those variables are absolutely true. But speaking on behalf of the boards that I'm on, nonprofits I'm on a board of, and also the customers that we work with, you'll get out of it what you put into it. So yes, for those who have been smart about doing that, not as much for those who haven't.
And Alex, I know that just from following your content, I know how much you bang the drum about organic reach as opposed to paid, or at least starting with organic. Can you talk a little bit about how you counsel clients on this, even beyond LinkedIn, just like more broadly around organic versus paid?
Yeah, I think we can all agree that LinkedIn on a unit basis is the most expensive platform. A lot of value, a lot of cost. And so if you are a smaller organization, your chances of having the firepower to see an ROI are lower, just because you probably can't sustain the amount of cash it takes to get to that point. And then the other most common mistake I see with LinkedIn ads is to use them as a direct response when they are not. You can, but most people don't view it in the right way. So to expect large results from a few $100s, and to use it as a call now, 1-800, donate to me or buy my B2B products, that isn't something that is going to rise above the skepticism and intention threshold of the average person. So if we only have run LinkedIn job ads internally for recruiting, which works quite well. It's a very different process. On the commercial advertising side, if I was going to do it, and when I counsel clients to, I encourage them to guarantee that somebody will read the content. Joey made a great point about having it in the feed. Whether it's organic or paid, the value should try to be in the feed. And you don't want to take people off the platform. So if your LinkedIn ad is leave LinkedIn and view this thing, it's going to go badly. If your ad is like, here's a carousel full of things you should know, and I'm going to do that in like 8 words per carousel on a really interesting image, amazing. That's going to work a lot better. Unfortunately, most people think, let me throw up a crappy image and a buy now button, and I'm going to expect the world. And that almost always falls flat, which is why I tell people, you're probably not ready for LinkedIn ads if you're asking this question. Once you're at the level of like, I have a pretty big budget and I can saturate this thing to make sure that everyone sees it, and you have a brand that stands on its own outside of that, great. Your brand is the thing, whether it's on Google Ads or LinkedIn Ads or any ad platform. If they know the brand that's advertising, they're going to click that one over the other one. And we see this all the time with companies that try to go against bigger brands on the commercial side. If they do well organically, they'll have more success. So you want to make sure that it's built on top of an organic foundation. Most common mistake is to try to skip that. RevenueZen is, a sub 10 million a year company. I would say we're not at the level to really be investing hardcore in LinkedIn ads yet. In part because if I write a post, it can get between 5 to 100,000 views on it. So why would I run ads? But when I'm ready to, I know that my followers in the secondary connections will be ready to see that. So I'm investing a lot in organic before ads. They're not bad. I'm not anti-ad. You need to be ready for it. You need to be ready to put a good amount of capital behind it and have the right intention, which is a little bit longer term mindset for a higher ROI than, the infomercial style. Stop thinking of LinkedIn ads as an infomercial. It will burn your wallet up faster than you can say campaign manager. I don't know what you're going to say, something like that.
And what Alex said is absolutely true. Native content uploaded to the post, as opposed to pushing people outside the platform, whether free or paid, is going to have 5 times the amount of reach than something that is not native. So that's really key, is if you're going to post something, make sure you upload it to that post, including video, and that it lives natively for the sake of maximum reach.
20-second drill down on that. The value of somebody's attention and skepticism is really high. We're bombarded with messages all the time. To even think about tapping or clicking something, even that little tiny thing, people won't do it unless there's a really good reason to. I won't click a link unless there's a really good reason to. I won't, if there is a good reason, I will go all in on that. But we are all so jaded. We are all so jaded that you have to take the effort to rise above that. So like native content is because of that. It's because we abused people's attention for years in marketing. We did it for decades. We have on the internet been doing this. We did it on TV. So let's respect people's attention and say, you don't have to click, you don't have to do anything. I'm going to give you the value right here. That's the way to respect people's attention. That's the reason why it works and why we've gotten to this position where it didn't used to be like that.
A little 10-second clip which I can add to that. I love everything that you said, Alex. And something that I often tell people is you can buy attention. If you have big enough of a budget, you can buy attention, but you can't buy trust. And I think everything you said around the importance of building up that personal or that brand first, that's what builds trust, right? And so I always worked for a small shop nonprofit, 20 employees or less, and we could never compete, not just on LinkedIn ads, but just ads in general, Google ads, Facebook ads. We could never compete with larger nonprofits and larger, even for-profit treatment centers that were doing what we did. And so we would just double down on the brand piece and the humanization piece, because that was our advantage. We were a small organization, so we could really invite people in, let people know what was going on. And so, yeah, I've never really gone the ads route, but like folks have said, I think on LinkedIn, you don't necessarily need to.
Yeah. Just to add an addendum to that, because what we know is there's 95, I think, % of nonprofits have 20 and less employees. So bringing it down to a much more frugality way of thinking, I think a good communications strategy inside the nonprofit, and even they would do this when I worked at Microsoft, is to spoon feed your staff what messages you want to push out to your constituents. And that's a really easy action item to do internally. And again, it's organic and doesn't cost a dime, but you've got to have everybody on the same, page and pushing out those messages as one mission.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I truly can't believe we only have about 6 minutes left of this conversation. It's really flown by. I still have a lot of questions left. I know we've gotten so many in the chat. If folks, last call for questions you want these experts to answer. But I think it would be helpful to go around in the last 6 minutes or so that we have. And I'd love for everyone to give like a tactical tip or something that you see working really. I know we've covered a bunch of these, but maybe something that hasn't been covered so far, and maybe just a story of when LinkedIn has worked really well for you, or something that has been really meaningful on the platform. Joey, did you want to kick us off?
Yeah, mine's very simple. Nonprofit.linkedin.com. With the understanding, go there and take a look around with the understanding that most of the resources are intended to be free and focused on the nonprofits that probably can't be paying customers. But if and when you think that there is something that you'd like to invest in, all of the information there as well. We invest heavily on that site. We do 2 to 3 blog posts per week talking about how to use LinkedIn in different use cases. So go there, study it, bookmark it, because I think you'll get a lot of value out of it. And thanks for letting me be a part of this, Dick.
Yeah, of course. Tanya?
So my favorite tip or tactic that I tell people that blows their mind is on LinkedIn, when you're doing a search, you can actually filter it down. And you all know what I'm talking about. When you're on LinkedIn, you can search for, a keyword, you can search for a name, you can search for an industry, and then you can filter it down based on first, second degree connection, what school they went to, what location they are. So imagine that part of LinkedIn. There's actually a checkbox that you can check for to see individuals who have self-selected that they want to join a nonprofit board. So check that out, because by doing those kind of filtered searches, you can have a very targeted list of people who have actually said, like, I want to get more involved philanthropically. So that can be a really great space for donor research. And as far as the story goes, I would just say, like, very quickly, I would say there are many, many stories where I would meet with a potential donor, I'd meet with a supporter, and they would mention something they saw on my LinkedIn. And I didn't even know they were on LinkedIn. I didn't even know they were looking at my stuff. So don't get discouraged if you don't have a lot of likes right away, if it seems like nobody's looking at your stuff, because they are. Them liking it doesn't mean that they're not internalizing it. You haven't planted a seed and they're not loving your content. So just keep going. People are looking.
Alex?
The best thing I can encourage people to do is to follow a short process of first demonstrating your credibility and then highlighting the results of your customers or donors. Walk people through publicly, names removed if you want, the experience that a successful sale or donor had upon completing it. What was the reaction of the main corporate sponsor's point of contact after the event? How did that conversation go? How were they feeling? What was the follow-up? Illustrate that impact. If you do that, I don't have to give you a post template. Do that in whatever way that you can think of. You can do this in a post. You can do it in a comment. I have written a good comment doing this and had a $40,000 PO confirmed and invoiced within 3 hours. It works. And if you, again, demonstrate your credibility so that people believe you and with your posts and comments, and then highlight the results of your customers and donors. Those 2 things are the key that I found to success on this platform.
Love that. And what do you have a favorite story of a connection you made or something that LinkedIn did for you?
Apart from the $40,000 PO in 3 hours?
That's the favorite.
Yesterday I wrote about how to scale CEO thought leadership on LinkedIn. And within 20 minutes, somebody direct messaged me and said, hey, I'm the head of marketing. We need to do this at our org. Do you do that as a service? You bet we do. Come on down. He sent me his email, and it was just that easy. It's just case in point. It happens so often that I almost don't have a favorite, because it's like clockwork. It is a regular thing. So once it becomes a regular thing, it'll still feel special, really. But the first time it happens feels the most special. Before it has happened at all to you, it can feel unattainable. But as you'll see if you are out there and you end up taking my course, you'll see plenty of examples, not just from me, but from individual people that are not CEOs, not even managers, that excel with this, and they get their inboxes blown up with requests from doing this exact thing. So it definitely works, and you don't even need to be an ED or a CEO to make it work.
Awesome. Mary, your turn.
Yeah, I would say 2 things real quick. Number 1, I think an audacious goal within a nonprofit is to help the CEO or the executive director, whatever you call that title, to become more of an influencer in the sector. That's a really communications goal that I think all nonprofits should aim for. And secondly, and this could be like a whole nother podcast, is the language that you choose to promote yourself. Meaning, should you be using more nonprofit speak when you're using LinkedIn, or for-profit speak? So like with for-profit, you talk about making money, whereas in the nonprofit sector, you talk about making change, making impact. In the for-profit, you talk about meeting a quota. In the nonprofit, you talk about changing the world and social change, philanthropy, etc. And again, this could be like a whole nother podcast, but what kind of language are you using to ignite your donors and your followers? And the two sectors speak very differently. And I think that that's an internal capacity building kind of conversation that good nonprofits have that are at the top of their game.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Just want to reiterate that this is Pond hosting the session. Anyone who joined, you can go get $50 in your account. And a lot of people ask, what can we use the money we're building up for? Well, just one of those things is a class with Alex here from Revenue Zen. You can now use your Pond credits to learn about B2B social selling with Revenue Zen. It's just one of the many, many offers there in the marketplace on Pond. So be sure and check that out, especially if you're wanting to make more of LinkedIn and other social platforms. And if you have any questions, you know where to find me. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, every day. So just shoot me a message and we'd love to chat. Thank you, everyone, so much for joining.
Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.